this is the house that God built. Yeah, through Paul, through Brother Ray, through Brother Steve, through Brother Randy, through our preaching. Oh God, save us from Christianity. Oh God, save us from Christianity. I don't want to be Christianized. I want to be apostolized. I don't want to be Christianized. I want to be apostolized. We don't dress the way we dress. Let me just clear a few things up for you right now. We don't dress because of modesty. I think I said that a little bit. I'm going to explain it now. We don't dress because this is modest. We could put canvas bags and potato sacks over our head. You know why we dress this way? Because we're Laynites. Right. And receiving how it's meant, I hope you get a good soundbite out of this. If Brother Layne wore a tank top and a baseball cap backwards and shorts, that's what I'd wear. The burden was to enter into what he did.
I somehow never, I went along with that. Somehow it didn't seem, even before I had all the understanding of the scriptures, it didn't seem like that ought to be like that. It just seemed like the Lord surely had more than that for the people of God. I couldn't understand how God would just keep the last of his people on the earth before he came back, and just keep them in a state of degradation and allow that. At the same time, I began to hear about the seventh trumpet message, and what I heard was all bad. The people that I met that knew anything about it weren't very impressive to me at all. I felt generally they had a harsh spirit. Some of them were off on tangents. They were worldly. They hadn't really dug back any real spiritual foundations. And I didn't really want anything to do with it. But I began to preach preliminary judgment, that we are now in judgment. That was something that was kind of new. And yet it was Church of God, because if we look at the song, The Great Sacrifice, and Warner's article on the wheat and tares were very impressive to me in my reading, and I thought, well, that's what Warner taught. We are now in the judgment. Well, that was something that wasn't being taught, really. They sang the Great Sacrifice, but they didn't have that understanding. It wasn't taught that clearly. And
may I interrupt? Sorry to interrupt. You taught preliminary judgment from where? From what scriptures?
I taught preliminary judgment from those scriptures that we have in the book under Great Sacrifice. In fact, I remember just making a message out of that song because I didn't want anybody to think I was veering off and getting involved in false doctrine from the Seven Seal people or whatever, or anybody else. I thought, well, this is right here. And if you remember the Evening Songbook, it has the scriptures of the song. And I just got out the song, and I just did that. I thought, well, if they get me on this, I'll just pull out the songbook and turn to page whatever it is and say, here's my outline, I did the same thing with the wheat and tares. I had an old sister minister from Guthrie come to my apartment when we were started having trouble. And she said, Brother Layne, she says, you're off. She said, the Bible says let the wheat and tares grow together until the judgment. And I said, sister, how long have you been? She said, I've been Church of God all my life. And I said, well, have you read Birth of Reformation? She said, well, yeah. She said, I probably read it as a girl or something like that. She's an old woman. I said, well, you need to read it again. I said, there's a section in there called Wheat and Tares, and it will tell you exactly what I'm telling you, that the dividing time is now. She said, no, that's, Brother Danny, that's a false doctrine. I said, it is not a false doctrine. That's a Church of God doctrine. I said, did you read it? I had a copy in the house. I got it, read it, showed it to her, and showed her a little bit of it, and she was shocked.
Who was the sister, Brother Danny? Do you know?
That was, I can't think of her name. But, she was shocked. And that's something that's still not really, at this point, it's not really understood among them. If there were and I don't think the Lord really has it for them. If they did, it would maybe clean some things up. I don't know. But at any rate, spiritual people that were there knew that there were things that were wrong, but they were waiting for a time where there would be wisdom to be able to deal with it. Well, you can't deal with it in the dark anyway. So, that's where they were. But when I came back, then I saw that there had to be something done, and but I didn't think I was going to have any part with that. That wasn't mine.
It did not the pressure kind of mount while still in the Faith and Victory movement with all of this accumulated with a couple of things. One of them primarily, when you got called into that ministers meeting, they tried to sit you down from going to some of those main places anymore because it was stirring up things.
Trouble. Yeah. Well, it did. It stirred up trouble everywhere. I mean, I couldn't open my mouth and it didn't stir up trouble. Even if I tried not to stir up trouble, it stirred up trouble. When I was preaching, it stirred up trouble. When I wasn't preaching, it stirred up trouble. They tried to locate it in certain areas and say, most of the trouble you're causing is here, here, and here. But actually, they couldn't pinpoint. In the ministers' meeting with me, I had just come back from overseas, and I was meetings, and I was sick, and I think it was just back from Germany.
I think actually, Brother Layne, if I'm not forgetting, it might have actually been in Chillicothe, Ohio.
Was it?
Because I remember the whole house, we were all really sick. And you were very sick. I remember you telling me you had just gotten that call from Brother, I believe it was Brother Austin.
Okay, it might
Telling me
be.
about the ministers' meeting, and you were very sick at the time, and you wanted to have the meeting when you got back pretty quickly or something.
Yeah. And they called me and told me I had to come, and I told them I'm terribly sick. I can't come to the meeting. And they said, well, you must come, whether you're sick or not. And so I went.
Where was that meeting?
That was in California. They flew out there for it. And
There were a few other ministers that saw some things a little more clearly back then, like Sister Reed, Brother Bowman, as far as the conditions of things, but they were not willing to back you up and stick out their necks and hinder their own reputations at that point in time.
that's exactly true. And even Brother Austus, he was not in that meeting, but he did see things. He wrote that book on Removing All the Ancient Landmarks. He knew that there were things that were creeping in, and that book details some of the things that he saw. But you're exactly right. There were people who actually had labored with me and knew.
They preached that message.
They preached that same message, and they knew that there were things that were wrong. But when it came to standing at my first answer, no man stood with me. I'll tell you, no. I mean, they were at a distance too. It wasn't like they were standing right behind me either. They were far off.
Who was in charge of that meeting? He wasn't.
Clifford Wilson was actually the senior minister there. He is Brother Austin's cousin. Donald Sharp's father opened up the meeting with a long harangue on he had been pastor here at Dayton, how much trouble I had created here in Dayton by having the meeting that I had here. that while I was here, he amen every bit of it. He thought it was wonderful. But evidently they found out later it wasn't so good. But he went on, and then several others did. It lasted, all of that lasted 2 days and into the night, each night. They kept going on and on and on, and it was, and then they would, at intervals, they would ask me, Brother Layne, do you have something to say? And I would just say, no, anything to say. I didn't make any comment at all during the whole 2 days, or answer anything. I just sat there. I was too sick. I was so sick I couldn't know what to answer. Finally, at the end of the meeting, they wanted, at one point I said, could I please have meet with just certain ones that I select and just have them counsel me about how to deal with this matter or whatever. So I wanted to talk to Sister Reed, Sister Sherman. Their husbands came in, and then Ed Wilson and his wife. And I said, I don't know what to do about this situation. I love the church. I want to have a good relationship. I want to be right. If I've done something wrong, I'll confess it and make it right. But at any rate, I need you to tell me what to do. They said, just humble yourself and do whatever you're asked to do. So I said, well, okay. I said, don't you think there are issues to be addressed? Well, you just do what the ministers say to do. So I said, well, all right. So I went back out. We went back out after maybe half an hour meeting. So then they came to the conclusion, that I was guilty. But, and Brother Clifford Wilson said, Brother Layne, would you answer me something? He said, do you have a difference with the church? Is there something, do you have a difference with the church? And I said, well, I thought he meant doctrinally or whatever. And I said, as far as I know, I'm in agreement, with the church. I'm not trying to, do anything or whatever. I wasn't preaching seven seal doctrine at that time or whatever. And I didn't really understand it that much myself. I understood preliminary judgment. I understood, some things, but I didn't really understand it that well myself. I didn't have an agenda. I was studying, but I wasn't doing anything. And so then they found me guilty, and I just said, well, could I ask something? And, yeah, it's sort of like, what am I guilty of? What do they told me I had to write letters of apology and everything, and I said, well, I'll do that. I'll write. Would you just please tell me what I'm apologizing for? Well, then they started looking at one another and shaking their heads, and nobody could come up with an answer, and nobody, literally, they didn't know, none of them knew what to say. There was about 35 ministers there. So finally they said, well, people where you have held meetings have gone back to their local congregations and they've caused problems. I said, so you're saying that I need to apologize, you want me to apologize for that? Yes, I want you to apologize for that. So I said, well, I don't mind. Could I ask another question? Yes. I said, has anyone ever left one of your meetings and gone home and caused a problem? Brother Layne, we just want you to write a letter of apology. I said, well, I'll do it. I'll gladly do it. And then we want you to go We want you to go to Dayton, we want you to go to Monarch Springs, and we want you to go to La Ronge, Louisiana, and read this apology, and we're going to send Brother Ed Wilson with you to, my words, be my watchdog. So I said, sure, and this will be at your own expense. Sure, no problem. Okay. So I went to La Ronge first and read it. Somebody has a copy of it. Anyway, and then I went to Dayton and read it here, and Ed was sitting right there on the pulpit, by the pulpit with me, to make sure I didn't leave out any words or anything, and I didn't. Then the last place was I was supposed to read at Monarch Springs, the National Camp meeting. So I went there at my own expense. I wasn't supposed to preach at Monarch Springs. I was never supposed to preach at... For 2 years, I was not supposed to preach at La Ronge. I was not supposed to preach at Dayton, and I was not supposed to preach at Milwaukee for 2 years. Okay. For the next 2 years that I was in the Faith and Victory movement, I did exactly what they told me to do. I did not preach at any of those places, except for Monarch Springs. I went there to camp meeting to read my little paper, and when I got on the grounds, it was just kind of cold and formal, whatever. I just went in, sat down, just like I usually do. I didn't sit up on the platform. I just sat down, second or third bench, and very low key. And then the people started coming to me and Brother Layne after the 34th day and asking me, Brother Layne, when are you going to preach? Well, whenever the Lord leads, I just whatever. And the camp started to be really stirred because they had heard about these ministers' meetings with me, and people were really stirred up. And I, up to that time, I had been one of the main, or not one of the main, but I had been a speaker there often at Monarch Springs. And they would deny that I was ever a main preacher, I think, in any regard. But there are a lot of tapes running around to prove it. But at any rate, 3 or 4 of the leading ministers came to me then and said they wanted, after one of the morning services, and they wanted to counsel with me. And I said, well, sure. Going on after that time, I had so much counsel. I was willing to listen to anything. I don't care. Beat me. And we got in the car. They came by and picked me up in a car. And there were 3 of them and me, and we went for a little ride. And they said, Brother Layne, we've changed our minds. We don't want you to read your apology here at the camera. We just don't think it would be good. And I said, well, now, wait a minute. I said, we might have a problem here. Because I said, I was pushed into this, and I came to the place where I said that I would write an apology, and I would read it in these places. And I humbled myself to what you wanted me to do. And it was well thought out. We had 2 days to think about it. And I've already done it in 2 places. This is the last of my little, I didn't say it like that, last of my little deals, and I want to get it over with. But at any rate, they said, no, we don't want you to do it here. It will just cause confusion. Well, here I am. I'm causing confusion again, but this time I'm doing it at their direct orders. And I said, well, I don't know. I have to pray about it. And another thing, Brother Layne, we would appreciate it if you just go ahead and feel free to preach. I said, I'm perplexed at that point. What do you mean, preach? I said, I'm not supposed to preach in this meeting. And, Brother Layne said, it's all right. He said, we'll be right behind you. We'll back you up. You just preach whatever the Lord lays on your heart. And I could hardly believe my ears. These were the very men who had been so I mean, I had been such a troublemaker and caused so much distress to everybody in here.
Was Ed Wilson one of them? Was Ed Wilson one of them?
Yes.
That's a good question.
And
Do you remember the others?
Yes. who
Mark
were they?
Salmons, was he in there?
Mark Salmons was, I'm pretty sure he was one of them. And I consider, the reason that I objected, rather than just accepting what they said, was I felt like I would be a party to hypocrisy. I was feeling like, look, if I do this, then they're hypocrites, and I am too. We're testifying of a relationship that has ended, you know, or is troubled. And so I told them, I said, well, as far as preaching, I don't know. We just left it. We just left it. Well, the pressure built on them more and more as the people kept asking them about me preaching. All the time I was sitting in someone's cabin, an upper story cabin, that belonged to the Walls, and I was, they had let me stay there in a very nice place, air conditioned as well, so I wasn't suffering much from the heat as they were. But they were getting a lot of heat. And I was working on a message called War on the Saints. War on the Saints. Dealing directly with the apostasy, silence, out of Revelation. And I still have the notes of that message. And I would go back up there to that air conditioning. I'd write a little more and write a little. That paper is just filled with all kinds of, it's a little paper like this, and it's just filled with all kinds of little notes all over it. And so I didn't know it was for that meeting. I was just studying. I was getting blessed studying out of Revelation, and so I thought, and I got the title from that Jesse Penn Lewis book, War on the Saints. That's where I got that. And I thought that sounds exactly like what we're going through here. So I used the title, but I took the warfare out of Revelation as being war against the silence and the church militant, facing the foe, and standing with the Lamb on Mount Zion, and so So it came down to the place where they were really intently begging me to preach. It got to the place where their messages were not being amen. It got to the place where people were going in this way like this, and it wasn't good. I felt bad. I felt bad for them.
What day of the meeting was this approximately?
I don't know, it was last weekend, I think, that I gave that message. In that message, I can prove it, I preached 7 sealed down the line, and they hollered amen. I never had better backers, even now, than I had in that service. And at the end of that message, and I preached how, the saints were under siege by these spirits. There had to be a judgment dealt out. God had given power to the church to deal with these kinds of things and whatever, and fallen prey to spirits here, and worldly spirits, and lukewarm spirits, and dead spirits, and blah, blah, blah. And I mean, I preached, and I preached a long time. They must have been hoarse, more than I was. At the end of that message, there was a tremendous response to the prayer bench. Tremendous. People were kneeled back in the aisles. Now, there'll be people that might listen to this later on. They might think, well, that wasn't really true. But it is really true. It is really true. I'll tell you it was really true. My memory is better than theirs, because I was not trying to make an impression. They drove me to the pulpit. And they got exactly what the Lord wanted them to have. At any rate, I never publicly withdrew from Faith and Victory. I never withdrew my ordination. They didn't withdraw my ordination because they had no grounds. They have never charged me with immorality. They have never charged me with any kind of misconduct whatsoever, and there's a reason for that. There wasn't any. And there isn't any. And so I still have my ordination from that body. However, I think it's God's ordination. I don't think they drug their feet all the way.
So you never made that apology in Monarch Springs?
No, never made it in Monarch Springs. That's the one point that I defaulted at their pleasure. I defaulted on. But otherwise, they accused me of not submitting to the ministry. What I'm getting at, they accused me when I left of not being willing to submit to the ministry, and I did exactly as I had preached. I submitted to everything they asked me to do.
Was that the last time you were at Monarch? Did you hear?
No, we went. I mean, that was the last time. I just stopped going. After that to their meeting. No, after 1988, in those seconds when I stopped going.
What year was that? Where they pushed you to preach? What year?
That probably was 87.
Okay.
No, it been before that. 86. I don't know. No, I can't put that together.
Probably 86 or 87, I would guess, at that point, because it wasn't that terribly long after, if I'm remembering correctly, that you came to where you saw, I can't do this for 2 years. I can't be under this. That's how I remember it anyway.
Well, it could very well be, but I did. I never went back there. I left, but I didn't go back I never went back and preached again at Tyrone, and I never went back and preached again at Monarch Springs. The last message that I preached in La Roger was Sister Manuel's funeral, and that was in 86. That was the last message.
So would it have been 86 or that time when you did preach in Tyrone, Dayton?
It would probably have been then.
Because I was a little boy, but I was there for one service.
Were you? Of that meeting?
Of that meeting.
Yeah.
You were going to give your testimony one night, and I wanted to go back so bad, but I couldn't.
No, that probably been one of the revival meetings that I held there. But this other they weren't letting me preach. I just stood up and read this thing.
Okay, I wasn't.
So it wasn't a meeting.
It was a revival meeting or something.
Yeah, that was before.
Brother Lee, just real quick, going way back, how far back did your family know about Church of God teaching or together, your father, and how far back?
My father's mother, the paternal grandmother, was Church of God. She went to a little meeting house under an old-time Church of God evangelist named Billy Arthur in Ashland. They were Tyler's people who had left in the split. I didn't know her very well, but she went there. Dad knew of those people, knew them well, and her husband, my paternal grandfather, got saved in his later years in the Church of God. So that's 3 generations on that side. On the other side, my maternal grandparents were both Church of God people. So it goes back 3 generations on both sides.
And this grandmother that you were talking about earlier that influenced you so much, that is the one that you used to live with when Mother was going through the
Yes, indeed. Yes.
Brother Layne, where do you remember first having read or seen people kneeling down before service?
That was in a Little Holiness Church in Peebles, Ohio. And I was there with Tommy Milo as we were traveling around, just seeing what we could dig up around about. Went in there, and a little mother, a little young mother with 2 or 3 little children came in and prayed loud at her seat before the service. Tommy was impressed by that, and I was too. And I thought, well, that's the way to go to meeting.
Did we not also see that in the Cayman Islands? I think it's the first place I saw it. I thought I remembered you talking about that there too.
I may have talked about that, but I don't think they do that. They don't do that.
I remember, what's his name, Arada, always,
Well, he did. He always went up front to pray, but I don't know that and he may have prayed beforehand. But it wasn't a general practice there. The first time that I taught anything on Revelation in the Restoration was at Nooksack, and I had to bring a blackboard, and I was where did I start? I think I started with the 8th chapter of Revelation at Pentecost maybe, and then did the 5th, the 6th and 7th trumpets, and explained it to them. And I told them, I said, well, now you don't need to take this, but I just want to give you this to think about.
remember that.
And I believe those are the two areas that I covered. I tried to go slow.
Yeah, the two witnesses.
And the two witnesses, was it? Okay. Ron Walter said, yeah, last year you said it was for us to think about. We didn't have to take it. This year it's law. So then I started to teach Revelation in earnest using chart that I had a copy of a chart. And later on I got a big cloth chart, but I had a little one. And I would put as much revelation as I could into the messages. And then it began the Lord began to unfold it, and it began to fit together why we were doing this. When we first stepped out in 1988, I had a real problem. And the problem was this, it kept to my mind. I wasn't looking at it too much in a spiritual way. I was thinking, I'm the only ordained minister. And these other ministers haven't preached hardly at all. And I am not, able to be around and preach every funeral and do everything everywhere. And I was doing most of the camp meeting preaching and a lot of stuff behind the scenes that people didn't know. And I was, this looked like a tremendous burden, just a tremendous burden. And it was a huge camp meeting, 35, 40 people, It was a tremendous burden. They were a burden.
Except a few of us, right?
But as I saw more, as I studied more and saw more, the Lord opened to my view what He wanted to do, which was to bring about a reformation. He first called it a reformation. And then at Nooksack, I got to reading over there where it said, talked about restore of the breach, and restore of paths to dwell in. And I said, no, this is not a reformation. This is not another reformation. This is a restoration of the Reformation. Mm-hmm. And so I remember telling the saints that in Nooksack. I don't know if you remember that, but I think I was standing over. I used to be over on the left side, and I stood up at my seat, and I was saying how I'd been studying about restoration, and that we were not another Reformation. We kept telling ourselves we were another Reformation. I said, no, we are a restoration of the Reformation. We're not going to have to undo what Brother Warner did. We just need to get back to that and back to the morning time. And so then we started calling it restoration. And I well remember when we first started singing, I'm so glad I'm part of the restoration. That was maybe years after that. That wasn't early on. It was in 2000. Anyway, there we are. One sister, I just want to say this for the sake of recording. One sister asked me in this meeting, she gave me a question, a sheet to answer questions, and she said, to what did I attribute my success? And I want to answer that question now. I don't feel like a success, and I don't feel like I've ever been the cause of a success. I really mean that. I feel like I have been hopefully a channel the Lord could use betimes and help me. I've gotten as much help as anyone has gotten, and I think it's not a matter of being a leader or being somebody. It's a matter of being a servant and doing what comes to hand, doing what's there to do, and that's the way I really feel about it. This has materialized. This work of God has materialized because God has been for us. We would have labored in vain, like the Bible says, were it not for the hand of God. If God is not in the work, we labor in vain that build it. And I can't say, I'm not telling you or anyone else, that this was all in my mind. And so we just went according to plan. I knew what I was doing. Always thought it would turn out this way, and always thought we'd have this chapel in Greenville, and you'd always, in my wildest dreams, I didn't understand the fullness. But I did have a burden to see, like we heard this morning, the air cleaner, and to be in a place where we could serve God, be in a place where we could have something other than hypocrisy and deadness, where the church could be the church. And that's been my burden from the Lord. And in whatever ways that my life's been a blessing to anybody, I'm sure that hasn't been because of me. It's only been because the Lord translated it and made it whatever it has been. It's sure. I'm sure there's a lot of people who wouldn't think my life's been much of a blessing to anybody, but at any rate, we just have to leave all that with the Lord. I can't please everybody, and so. But I'm very thrilled that to have a part in the family of God, to be saved, that the Lord helped me to be able to worship in this place. I don't know what I would do if this was not available. I can't figure out where I would go. I've thought many times, if this just didn't exist, well, then what would be the next choice? Where would I go? And thinking that over, you don't have to think, or I don't have to think very, very long to think, well, it would be an utter catastrophe spiritually for me if I didn't have the saints in the Church of God as we know it. It's amazing to me how God has reached back into my past, pulled something old, something new, something borrowed, something blue, and brought everything to this wedding. But that's what He's done, and it's wonderful. There's been a lot of there's been a lot of pain. I won't say there hasn't been a lot of pain. There's been a lot of pain from the beginning. I thought I knew pain out on the streets, but I didn't experience anything on the streets that has caused me as much pain as some that I've experienced from those who were supposed to be brethren. And I've labored hard. I have labored hard. Sometimes unwisely, sometimes incompetently, sometimes very. But I have labored very hard. I've not been idle. One of the things that's hardest in my old age, I think, is that I was always able to play backstop. If nobody had a message, I would get up and preach, and the Lord would help. And nobody had a song, I'd sing a song. Or if nobody had a testimony, I'd have a testimony or a short. I would always be able. But now I'm at a point in time where I feel very ineffective because there are times when I'm just not able. And I feel like a fifth wheel or something. But I've done, I think, like the Bible says, she done what she could, and I think I've done what I could, and I have to leave it with results. And when I go, then I'll be gone, and you all will be doing what you think needs to be done. And of course, I hope that you'll hold fast to what you have learned and add to it more. Let the Lord add more to it. There will never be two individuals that are exactly alike. There's certainly not going to be any clone of me. I understand that. And I wouldn't wish that on anybody. But you have to realize, and I think Guthrie people and other people, they found fault with me, and it's legitimate. I'm going to tell you, it's legitimate. I'm quite a character. I am from Kentucky. I'm from those hollers, and I have my way of expressing myself, and I have my ways of doing, and I have, and it's not always very appropriate to other people how I do. But I can't be other people. All I can be is where I came from and what I am. And I know I've offended people, and a lot of times if I've been more careful, or somebody can't be careful 24 hours a day, sometimes you have to pet your dog. I don't know. So I understand. I can be abrasive. I understand that. My mother told me, she said, and she was not with us. Her offerings came here, but she was not with us. But she told me, she said, well, the Lord called you to do what you're doing. But she didn't say that. She said, because he knew that other people could not take this, what you do, what you're taking. And that's kind of strange coming from someone who's not with us and just kind of on the outside looking. But she knew my character. I have maybe tremendous weaknesses, and I have some strengths that maybe others don't have. It's kind of a mishmash. But the Lord built my character through some of the things that I have been through, even on the street and even as a child. And it seems like that it has stood me in good stead as far as being able to qualify for some of the things that I've had to do. Probably all of you, at one point or another, I've had to give a talking to. I don't think anybody's escaped that knows me over very long. But don't be too grieved with me, because I give them to myself too. And I probably harder on myself than you do. I think there are times when there are things that in the church where Brother Ray wasn't around and he wasn't preaching, and others were around, maybe didn't know what to do. I had to take the bull by the horns and make some decisions. And we had a camp meeting service up in Nooksack where somebody got up and preached on divine healing, about doing without Deadner, and we weren't going to go anywhere as a restoration if we didn't cut off using Deadner, and that the thing was going down, and the only people that were amening him were those that had false teeth, and you know, and here, that's interesting. And I was upset, and I went outside the tabernacle door, and there was a dark spot there on the side, and I just sat there leaning back against the building. And so all the saints came out, and he was in there somewhere. I knew he was because I was waiting for him. And he came out, and I said, you come here. I said, we're going to go have us a talk. And we went out in the quadruplex out there. And I heard later on, they said she could have heard you talking to him all the campground. I said, let me tell you, if you ever do anything like that again. He just about tore the whole thing apart that night. I had to do the same thing with Donnie Sharp down in Louisiana. He got up and as much as preached, if you had cold chills and put a blanket on, or took orange juice for a cold, you were compromising. And I waited till he was done, and then I said, I'd let them sing their song, see who'd go to the altar. I want to see who'd go to the altar. And then I got up and I said, now you can all sit back down.
Praise the Lord.
So there have been a lot of times like that. I mean, really, over the years, there's been a lot of times like those kinds of times. When the gift of governments had to just operate, and something had to be said, and it had to be done. Right there, somebody reminded me last night, or yes, the night before last, me in Chillicothe, I was sick, and they had a big crowd gathered there, and I had the flu, and I had a big old coat, and I wore that, and I told them, just get me a real warm blanket. And I sat on the stage. It was had a stage there. I sat on the stage with my feet dangling over, and I preached that message just as sick as a dog. And I preached sicker than that a lot of times since. But my feet, I have half feeling in all my toes, and from baptizing in Lake Erie that time. And if I'd been in there maybe 2 minutes longer, I'd lost my toes. 91. Baptizing in February. So, you know, that was cool. But anyway, we just did as we felt. This didn't just, it wasn't all accidental either. It didn't just come with nothing.
That Louisiana meeting was the one that the Baldwin, the ones from Canada, came to check out to see if this was the way. And the Lord looked at it, it went right over their head.
Didn't even
They came back and talked about it a little bit. They didn't know sure what to do with that, but they liked the rest.
Oh, it was so bad to have visitors there that were looking, and then have something like that.
I was at the Chillicothe meeting when that one work man stood up.
I know what you mean. Tried to take over.
tried to take over the service and sang him down. And I just thought, well, that's interesting.
Part of the
These people
service.
just, start singing. I didn't realize what.
Yeah. Yeah. Been some really interesting experiences.
Do you recall when you met Brother Alfonso for the first time?
Yes, I do. It was on Monarch Springs Campground in the early 80s, and maybe 82 or 83, he might remember. And he liked my manner, I guess, because I was radical. He was a little upset with the non-radical. But he asked me then about going to Germany. If I would consider going to Germany with him sometime.
And you had never been to Germany until then?
No. He would, the first 3 or 4 times was with him, and he was my translator. Very interesting.
Was there something that it seems like there was something that he would not translate that you were trying to preach?
Yes, we were in an ordinance service, and I was preaching about Jesus having washed Judas' feet, and he doesn't believe that. And he looked over at me, and I had built up to this point in the message. This was the main point. This was the main point. I'd spent 30 minutes, 35 minutes trying to, build this up how Jesus treated his enemies. And he looked at me, cocked his head, you know how he does, and he looked at me and he says, I'm not going to translate that. I don't believe that. And I was just, what do you say? And I didn't know what to say. I just tried to move on to another point. I guess I don't know how that ordinance service turned out. Yeah, if he didn't believe it, he wasn't going to translate it.
He wasn't going to tell him what you said.
No. And they didn't know that he told me in English, of course, and so they didn't know that he had just disrupted my message entirely. I was perplexed. Well, I hope all this will be edifying. I don't know.
This is good. Maybe we can do it some more later.
Sure.
Yeah, not to wear you out, but
They'll
Just here till Monday afternoon.
yeah.
maybe we can do it some more because it seems like we should ask something about like when you first met the saints, like Sister Much and Ron Walter, when the preachers started coming in, what you felt about that the Tinsmans coming in, or like a new crop of preachers.
That was my question, Steve.
Yeah, that's been very interesting, hasn't it?
You needed that before
I've
you
had
go
some
that one,
anxious
Brother Danny.
moments. I want to tell you, I've had some anxious moments. Will they or won't they? Or how are they going to work out? It hasn't all worked out.
Any chance we could do that Sunday evening? Just
Yeah, it's all right. With me. Try to do what we can. All right. Everybody at
Well, thank the Lord.
Brother Ray begins to bend and bow on the standard, begins to take to preach a lesser gospel than that the Church of God has taught. Don't you follow him.